One can't really deny the fact that our current media landscape is sort of oversaturated with superheroes. But then, why does Homelander feel so bloody different? Perhaps it just comes down to the fact that this star-spangled psychopath is the single most detestable character we've ever seen. Evil supermen have been a thing in comic book media for a while now, but nothing even comes close to the sheer terror inspired by Homelander's perfect smile. When Amazon decided to adapt The Boys, I guess we were all really doubtful whether the TV show could really hold up to the sheer ultraviolence and debauchery depicted on the screen. But somehow, the team outdid themselves, and the standout for most of us was Anthony Starr's performance as the murderous leader of the Seven. Though Starr's rendition of Homelander is definitely a masterclass in acting, many longtime fans couldn't overlook the creative liberties the show seems to have taken with the character. Honestly, Homelander's arc is pretty different from the original comics, so in this marvelous video, we'll be listing the top 12 changes the series made in order to get the perfect Homelander onto our screens. But before we go down this dark and twisted path, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to our channel. It might just be a small click for you, but to us it means an awful lot. With that out of the way, let's go! Tragic backstory of Homelander. For all the messy stuff that happens on the pages of The Boys comic book, there's one thing that the source material strayed away from. We never really got a concrete backstory for Homelander throughout the book's run, and this led many fans to come up with their own theories regarding the narcissistic monster. For the longest time, fans also believed that the live-action adaptation would take a similar route, as the storyline steered clear of Homelander's past for the majority of the first 3 seasons. Yeah, we do get some glimpses of a terrified blonde boy locked up in some sort of cold medical facility, but that's about it. Then Season 4 Episode 4 dropped, and we all collectively lost our minds. This episode explores Homelander's backstory, and turns it into one of the most horrifying massacres we've ever witnessed on the screen. After being pressured to raise Ryan and identifying his crippling need for love, Homelander begins to question his own childhood, which leads him back to the top-secret facility where Vought's top scientist raised him. Even a single glance at the metallic Cold War-era bunker is enough to see that no child should ever be raised here. Here we learn that Vought International raised Homelander in hopes of creating the most powerful superhero of all time. The public would think that Homelander, a supposed alien, had just landed in America one fine day. But Barbara, the scientist responsible for raising Homelander, reveals that Vought just paid some poor woman about $2,000 to carry the superpowered embryo to term. When it was time, Homelander lasered the woman's guts from the inside and rose into the air with his umbilical cord still attached. A mythical monster more than a baby. Perhaps this is why the team of scientists was always terrified of Homelander, often treating him with disdain while conducting torturous tests on him, and treating him like a lab rat. We also learn that Vought brought in some of the best psychologists from all around the world to carefully engineer the need for love within Homelander, to always keep him obedient. The trauma that Homelander endured during his time in the facility is probably the key reason behind his unhinged personality. And honestly, we aren't even sad that he massacred most of the scientists for his personal growth. Good for you, champ. Burning people alive might just be a tad too intense for our tastes, but at least he's trying, right? Right?
Or did, or I'll punch straight through the hull.
The plane crash is more shocking. The Boys fans already know what crash we're talking about. It's kind of difficult to forget. I mean, that's the kind of scene that remains etched in your brain forever, feeding nightmares until you finally end up at a therapist. Well, in one of the darkest events in the entire series, Homelander and Queen Maeve are tasked with saving a passenger plane that's been hijacked by terrorists. What seems to be a fairly standard superhero act takes a pretty wild turn when Homelander accidentally destroys the aircraft's steering and communication systems while taking out the terrorists, and basically decides to abandon all the passengers instead of, saving them. This is probably one of the coldest acts of indifference ever exhibited by Homelander, and it even sends tears down Queen Maeve's eyes. But what if we told you that this entire thing was even darker in the comic books? Well, for one thing, the hijacking takes place during the most tragic event in American history, 9/11. The setup is pretty similar to that of the Seven, who were tasked with saving the plane. A young boy spots the heroes approaching, proclaims that they're going to be saved, and is promptly sucked out of the aircraft as Homelander rips the door off. When the passengers desperately call out to him, Homelander yells, "Shut up!" and ends up destroying all of their eardrums. The Seven begin bickering about how to handle the scenario, and Homelander, frustrated with all the infighting, hits Queen Maeve and simply takes off. As the leader is flying out, Mr. Marathon, the first speedster of the Seven, clings to Homelander and has his head separated. It just keeps getting wilder as the heroes desert the aircraft, and it eventually crashes into the Brooklyn Bridge. And remember, all of this occurred on the same day as 9/11. The clone of Homelander is absent in the TV show. If you haven't read the comics, just skip to the next section, because we're about to spoil one of the greatest twists in the entirety of the series run. Just like in the TV show, Homelander's personality begins to grow more and more unhinged as the tale progresses, and he eventually surpasses all forms of authority. Things get so bad that Vought is forced to call in their most potent insurance policy, which was put in place just to keep Homelander from going AWOL. Well, there are not many things that can stop a superpowered megalomaniac, but what if you pit two of them against each other? Well, that's exactly what unfolds in the comics, when it's revealed that Black Noir is actually a clone of Homelander planted by Vought to take the hero out when he gets too much for the men in the suits. But this clone isn't a savior either, as he's done some pretty terrible things himself, which include cannibalizing a baby. I guess we preferred him as Noir. Chief creator of the TV show, Eric Kripke, has also expressed his admiration for the twist. However, it's unlikely that many clones will make it onto the TV show, as Kripke considers them to be too unrealistic for the show's grounded tone. The show revealed Black Noir's backstory in the 3rd season of the show, and we have to say that it's much better suited to the tone of the story. Still, it would be pretty fun to see two Homelanders on the screen together, to be honest. But in Kripke we trust.
No more lies.
Starlights Assault is much worse. Well, this is one of the more difficult ones out there. Not only is it disturbing and disgusting, but it's also one of those crimes that could even be seen as somewhat realistic. Undoubtedly, all of you remember what our naive country girl Starlight went through during her induction into the Seven. But at least in the TV show, the Deep was the perpetrator of this heinous assault. Not only is the act demeaning for Starlight, but it's also extremely illegal in almost every country on the planet. But, well, the soups don't really care. Starlight's ordeal is made much worse in the comics. It occurs at a similar point, just as Starlight is being inducted into the Seven. We see her fly up to headquarters and meet Homelander, a man whom she has seen as an idol for most of her young life. But the moment the two enter a private chamber, Homelander drops his pants and beckons Starlight to, well, please him for a moment. Starlight believes that the legendary Homelander is being mind-controlled. She calls out for Noir and A-Train, who are in the vicinity, but there's no help. Instead, the other two heroes also drop their pants and ask Starlight to service them after Homelander is done. They make it explicitly clear that Starlight wouldn't be invited to the Seven without committing the unspeakable act, and the desperate youngster is forced to agree. This is probably one of the worst ways in which we've seen the soups exploit their power, and sadly, there's much more to come.
Okay, let me put this person
Homelander sexually assaults Becca. Butcher's beloved wife Becca is certainly the most pivotal character in both the series and the comic books. Not only is she the driving force behind Butcher's ruthless quest for vengeance against the soups, but she has a fairly disturbing history with Homelander. In the show, Becca was the senior director of digital marketing at Vought International. Though she's considered dead at the beginning of the series, we soon realize that she's been living in hiding along with Homelander's son Ryan. It all began during a Christmas party in 2011, where Becca introduced Butcher to Homelander. Something twisted took root in Homelander's mind that night, and just a couple of nights after the event, he raped Becca. This resulted in an unwanted pregnancy, which was meticulously kept under wraps by Vought. They made her sign legal forms, forcing her to keep the secret, and eventually oversaw the procedure that resulted in Ryan's birth. For 8 years, as Becca raised the kid in a secret Vought facility, not even Butcher realized that his wife was alive. A similar set of events takes place in the comics. Here, Becca is a social worker based out of London. During her honeymoon with Butcher, the couple accidentally encountered the Seven on a press tour, where she caught Noir's eye. That night, the clone entered Becca's room and raped her in Homelander's disguise. She grew more and more emotionally distant due to the trauma and eventually realized that she'd been impregnated. In the comics, the birth was premature, and the baby ripped itself out of Becca's womb right in front of Butcher's eyes. Suddenly, the sheer hatred Butcher has for soups makes sense. Homelander's alleged child was killed by Butcher. Over the years, the relationship between Butcher and Ryan has become one of the most endearing parts of the fairly disturbing show. One might expect that Butcher would grow to hate the child, due to whom he was separated from his wife, but somehow the two actually strike up a father and son bond. This relationship has been put to the test multiple times, and somehow it's always managed to survive. But in the comics, it doesn't really get the chance to advance that far. In the books, the child's powers started manifesting while it was still in the womb. One night, Butcher would wake up to a strange Lovecraftian baby floating in midair, hovering over the corpse of his dead wife. Homelander's child had ripped its way through Becca's womb, and Butcher basically had to beat the infant with a lampstand. In the comics, Becca's gruesome death at the hands of the soup baby would become a reason for Butcher's burning hatred, while in the show, Ryan might just be the reason why he learns to love. Toxic power couple. What do you get when a superpowered megalomaniac falls in love with another superpowered Nazi? An extremely toxic and murderous power couple, of course. That's exactly how the TV show saw Stormfront and Homelander's relationship when the former made her first appearance in the second season. Homelander instantly took a liking to the Machiavellian Nazi, and after some superpowered copulation, the two were officially a thing. Together, the duo would come up with some of the most racist, deplorable, and disgusting schemes. And we were all glad when Stormfront was finally beaten to a pulp by Starlight, Kimiko, and Maeve. Well, in the comics, Stormfront is a guy. A Nazi superhero, he was considered to be the first supe on the planet, and his DNA was pivotal to Homelander's creation. Of course, he's just as racist and terrifying as his TV show counterpart, but we gotta say, this is one of those rare occasions where gender flipping the character really paid off. Not only did it allow us to see a formerly unseen aspect of Homelander, but it also allowed us to see how the man reacts around someone he considers his equal.
I'm the upgrade.
The relationship with Soldier Boy. So, in the comics, the aforementioned Stormfront provided the DNA sample from which Homelander was created. Vought used Stormfront's DNA to create their greatest product, and Homelander was unparalleled in his popularity ever since he made it onto the superhero scene. As for Soldier Boy, he's just a side character, for the most part, appearing in some of the flashbacks from World War II. He was just as psychopathic as the other supes and ended up getting dishonorably discharged. In the modern era, a new hero has taken up Superboy's mantle, and he is far from Homelander's equal. Not only is he something of a coward, but he also wants the 7 membership so badly he sleeps with Homelander to get in. However, the Soldier Boy we're introduced to in the TV show was a far cry from his comic book counterpart. In the show, Soldier Boy was wildly popular and powerful in his own right, to the point that he was the most respected hero before Homelander took his place. An egotistic and uncaring douchebag like almost all other heroes, Soldier Boy had the distinction of being an American icon after serving in World War II. His ways eventually grew too uncontrollable for Vought, especially the new CRO Edgar, who began seeing him as a liability. But before Vought decommissioned Soldier Boy, they used a sample of his DNA to create a brand new icon, Homelander. This strange relationship between the two greatest heroes in the series gave us the most impactful I am your father moment since Star Wars. And the way this new info got under Homelander's skin was just so satisfying.
Not me, of course.
Homelander is not a slave anymore. Needless to say, Homelander is a pretty big deal in both the comics and TV shows. However, the comic paints the character as a puppet of Vought with nearly no agency of his own. Of course, he still gives in to fits of rage and lacks impulse control, but he's still very much under Vought's control. Though he started out kind of similar in the TV show, exhibited through his strange infatuation with Madeline Stillwell, he did grow up over the seasons, especially after his encounters with Stormfront. Homelander began seeing himself as more of a god than a hero, and this also extended to his decision-making process. He would go on to take complete control of Vought and even bought his own version of the Seven to take over the company. With his surging popularity and divisive politics, it's certain that Homelander is much more than a mascot in Kripke's show. Also, he recently recruited Sister Sage to serve as the de facto CEO of the company, which means that there's more power in his hands now than ever before. Homelander is smarter in the TV show. Comic book Homelander is a simple guy. He likes to be worshipped but doesn't really seek political power at any point. On the contrary, he's naive enough to get manipulated by most other characters on multiple occasions. I mean, why would a literal god need to use his brains to keep up with us mere mortals? But in the show, Homelander is way more scheming than we expected. Though he's still unbelievably petty and childish, he can still come up with pretty solid plans to keep up his reputation. Also, none of his teammates, apart from Sister Sage, seem to be capable of manipulating him. Instead, they're servile little toys to be used as he pleases. Just look at the sheer terror he inspires in characters like the Deep and A-Train, which just goes to show that there is indeed a clever mind behind that perfect face. Homelander's milk obsession. Now, Homelander has some pretty evident issues. In fact, the list is so long that we'd be here all day if we started stating them all. But of all these, the most crippling is his love for milk. And no, he's not just hungry for some good old calcium. Instead, this is a bizarre psychological condition that basically attracts him to human breast milk. We first saw glimpses of this in Homelander's strange interactions with Madeline Stillwell, who had just given birth and was thus lactating. We were about to write these strange tendencies off as some very blatant mommy issues, but then we saw the guy milking a cow in Season 3. As he milks the cow, a strange, almost orgasmic expression appears on the hero's face, and most of us probably squirmed pretty hard watching that part. Even Anthony Starr revealed that Homelander experiences an almost sexual pleasure from the milking. I hope that the boys can at least get Homelander banned from all dairies on the planet by the time the show ends. Come on, Butcher, we know you got it in you. Surprisingly, these bits were all added to the character during the TV show and never appeared in the books. Homelander kills Black Noir. One of the most shocking moments in Season 3 was the disembowelment of Black Noir at the hands of Homelander. Up until this point, Noir had been played as a pretty reliable sidekick, someone both Vought and Homelander could always trust. But once Homelander figured out that Black Noir was aware of his true lineage, it all became too much for him to bear. Homelander would dig his fingers into Noir's belly and pull all the fun squishy parts out. Not really a good way to die. But in the comics, we see the exact opposite take place. As we already know, the Noir from the comics is essentially Homelander's clone, designed to take the latter down, in case he decides to break away from Vought. Well, not only is this a pretty thrilling twist, but it eventually leads to Homelander's death at the hands of Noir. Since the death happens off-panel, we don't really know much about the encounter between the two, but given that Noir is Homelander's clone, it sure wasn't pretty. At least it serves him right. Marvelous verdict. So, there are some pretty major differences between the Homelander from the comic books and the one from the TV show. But somehow, the character is just as despicable in both mediums, and we love him for it. Most of the changes incorporated into the TV show actually work out pretty well, and allow the creative team to use the medium to its full potential. And if the early episodes of Season 4 are any indication, things are just gonna get worse. Well, not for us fans, because come on, who doesn't enjoy a good old-fashioned gore fest? Well, that's it for this video. Do let us know which of the boys' characters you'd like for us to cover next. Also, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and stay updated with all of our marvelous content. That's it for this one, but don't worry, because we'll catch you all pretty soon. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.